What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Outrank Podcast. I'm your host, Rafael. Usually I'm joined by at least one other guy, whether it be Lewis or Nowicki. But today they have some family things that they need to take care of, and family comes up, and we understand that. So today it's just me, and I'm joined today by Jason Utley, as I like to call him, Jay Utley, who I was deployed with back in 2013. Jay, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for taking your time on a Sunday to come out here and talk with me.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to talk to and catch up with old buddies and kind of see how life's taking them and how everything's been moving forward.
Yeah, so I tell everybody, I give everybody a background, and the podcast started because I believe everybody who's ever served, whether it be as a first responder, military, in the medical career field, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got a story. And a lot of the stories we hear are, of course, of the special forces people and the real big heroes, the SWAT guys and all the guys that do all the cool stuff. Not to say that we didn't, but nobody really talks about it. And your story deserves to be told. So thanks for coming on here and sharing about it, man. I really do appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the opportunity.
So where did you grow up? Where is growing up at?
Dad was he was Air Force, worked in comms, so he was stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi. So I think we got down there in '93, and that's where we stayed up until I ended up going to college. Graduated Biloxi High in '05, did a couple of years of junior college, and went up to Mississippi State University, and had a lot of fun there. Wasn't as disciplined or responsible as I should have been. So I ended up wasting a lot of time and not really going anywhere.
So you grew up your whole life in Mississippi, right?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, as much as I can remember. I mean, we spent a little. We lived in Germany a couple of years when I was real young, and I've got a couple of memories of that. But Mississippi has always been home.
Okay. How was growing up through like the schooling portion? What kind of student were you?
Awful. It's just those things. I was always really bored. Had a lot of just didn't want to be there, and I spent a lot of time staring out the window and not really paying attention. And I've seen a couple memes here and there where it's like I zoned out for 5 minutes as a kid. Now I'm don't know any of this other stuff, and now I'm doing this other job. So like it feels like there's a whole lot of holes there that I just don't remember. Feel like it was never taught. I know that it was, just didn't really pay attention. So school and education was always just a challenge for me when I was young.
Okay, so like all the way from elementary going up through high school and stuff like that, it was just kind of a challenge.
I think around 10th, 11th grade is when I really kind of kicked into gear there. I felt it wasn't that I wasn't bored, as I felt like the material was too easy, so it wasn't challenging enough. So I was like that kid that showed up and would sleep in class, but always did well on the tests.
So it was almost like you were too smart for the subject that was getting taught, because it was getting taught at a lower level.
I wouldn't say I was too smart. It's just it felt like I understood it. Like I understood the foundations of what they're trying to go through, so I can kind of piece my way through it.
Yeah, and like it's funny because a lot of the people that I've talked to, and even me, like I had a difficult time in school. It wasn't because I didn't grasp a lot of the information, unless it was math. Then I wasn't grasping anything. Math was terrible, but everything else kind of started coming to me, and I was just like, well, I understand a little more than what you're teaching. So I kind of would be like, yeah, I can not show up today.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to go to class,
Yeah. So, and I kind of coasted through high school, and I didn't really in junior college. Felt kind of like an extension of that. It wasn't too challenging. I didn't really have any direction what I wanted to do, and then at some point decided on engineering. Then if you're in the state, one of the best schools that we've got in the state for engineering is Mississippi State. So I decided to go up there, and it was a brutal wake up call.
Really?
There was a very big gap between what I thought I knew and what I didn't know, and so I had a lot of struggles when I went to school around the first time when I enrolled in '07. So it was mostly just floundered around for 3 years. Didn't really achieve much. Just kind of wasn't going nowhere.
Wow. So did you play sports or anything like that in high school? And
I mean, I played football when I was young, like Pee Wee League and stuff. And at some point, I stopped playing.
okay, okay, because and the reason I ask that is a lot of people who join the military have like a leadership background and a sports background that taught them a little bit about leadership and being part of a team. So I didn't know if you had any background on that, but Pee Wee's a good place to start. You know, it starts there.
Hmm.
So when you went to Mississippi State and you said it was a wake up call for you, what
Hmm.
was the biggest jarring thing? Because you were at junior college, you were good enough to get into school to junior college. So was it the engineering program or was it just college in general?
I think it was just in college in general, because it was, first time out on my own. Um, so there was no, I guess, like safety net. There was no kind of, I don't know, like built-in structure around you. You're living with your parents. There's still structure. When I got out and went to state, I didn't have that. So it was a whole new experience. And I just, if I was, and I was still working through school. So if I wasn't like at work or in class, like I didn't want to do any of the school stuff. So I wasn't responsible enough or disciplined enough to sit down and actually do the schoolwork. Um, and so I ended up just wasting a lot of time.
Did you end up getting your degree by chance or?
Not that time. After a couple of years, my grades suffered. I was kind of floating around. At some point, they're like, "Hey, uh, obviously you're not doing well, and you need to figure some stuff out. So why don't you leave for a period of time?" So that happened, and the military was the next step for me. I'd always planned on joining, but I'd always planned on being commissioned first, and then going in, um, or getting my degree, and then going in commission. That didn't plan out, so changed the plan. Now
Yep.
I'm going in a little earlier than I planned on it. So after that, I decided it's like, all right, let's go do this military thing because I didn't have any prospects. I didn't finish school, and I didn't couldn't figure out anything that I really wanted to try and get into or do. So I joined the military.
So let's I want to just back up a little bit because you met your wife prior to joining, right? Was she a student with you?
And now we went to the same junior high together, so we've known each other since we were 13. Uh,
Okay.
we ran in the same group of friends, all through junior high and high school, and then she had moved into the next school district, so we kind of like lost touch and stuff. And then we went to the same junior college. We'd see each other a couple times here and there, and then it wasn't until we got to Mississippi State, I think our first semester. She back when MySpace was a thing. I had my MySpace decked out with Mississippi State colors and logos and stuff, and she just so happened to click on it and see that I was up there. I reached out and we started kind of talking again and like, hey, we're living in the same apartment complex and stuff. So we, kind of reconnected and then, stayed connected, for a couple of years after that. And because she was, had her boyfriend and stuff. And I wasn't trying to get involved with that. But then, um, towards the end of my time at state, she was single, I was single, and we kind of hit it off. And, the rest is history. We dated for 9 months or so and decided to get married before I joined. And then we had a 3-week engagement, and then that was it. We're married, and been happily ever since.
So how long is it officially that you have been together?
Married would be 15 years this Thursday.
Congratulations, brother.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. That's awesome. And she stuck through you through the basic training and everything, man. I mean, and deployment and
Yep.
all that stuff.
Those first couple of years were real rough. I mean, the first 2 years that we were married, I was gone probably 15 to 16 months. Uh, with basic training, with EOD stuff while I was there, and then of course security forces training, and then came back for 2 months, and then I was out the door again for another 8.
So I want to back up a little bit because you went through basic in what year?
2011.
Okay. And you always had a drive to serve because your dad was in the Air Force. So it was kind of one of those. you knew you were going to join. You just thought you were going to join as an officer and get your
Mhm.
commission. So when the enlisted thing panned out, was it ever a thought of possibly making it a career, or was it a maybe just for 4 years and
I was on the fence. It really depended on what job I was doing. Uh,
okay.
but the goal was always to finish my degree or go
Okay.
back and finish it, whether that was at the 6 year mark or some time down the road. I think it really just kind of depended on what career field I went into. It
So
really
how
that decision.
the contract you signed, what was it? Did you have a guaranteed contract to go to EOD, or was it
Yep,
okay?
I did whenever we went to MEPS, I put down the jobs I was qualified for, and then EOD and aerial gunner, and after my wife explicitly said don't do anything dangerous, so got picked up for EOD, and then went to so I got slotted for EOD. Then after basic, went to EOD NDOT course. Got through that, and then went to the schoolhouse down in Eglin.
So how was because like you said, you went EOD and then you came security forces. What was challenging in EOD? Do you got any funny stories, any good stories around there throughout your time in training?
No, because not really. I mean, it was other than one story. One of the things that they like to do whenever I got there was as soon as you got off after you graduate NDOC, they put you on the plane. Because the NDOC is in San Antonio at the Medina location, and so after NDOC, they put you on a plane and fly you down to Eglin, and then the schoolhouse instructors pick you up from the airport, and they drive you all back to the dorms or wherever you're staying, and then they tell you to put your bags up and meet them back in the day room, and then you're getting loaded with rucks and vests and everything. So because now they're going to take you on a ruck because they're gonna put you through it day one. So
No,
within an
no
hour of
rest for the
landing,
weary. No
yeah,
rest for the weary there.
I had a ruck on. I had a old school flak vest and helmet, and we were out running Florida.
Oh.
And I remember at one point they wanted all the new guys because they had some other schoolhouse people there too, like people already in the schoolhouse that are kind of waiting on their slots.
Right.
Uh, they want all the new guys to tie these little ribbons to their uh, rucksacks, and I didn't think about it. I just tied it where I could on my shoulder, which was on the flak vest itself. And so at one point they told us to take the flak vest off and put the rucks on, and because I didn't follow directions initially the first time, they start my nickname for the rest of the time was Airman. I do what I want, and so I got in some trouble there for not following directions. And so anytime they'd see me, that's what they would call me. And yeah, I mean that was I mean it was one of those things that just kind of hung with me for a while.
They say EOD is the hardest course to really get through as far as training wise goes because you need to know so much about pretty much the components of explosives and
Well,
how that
it's
goes.
it's a long schoolhouse, and they've got the different aspects, ground munitions, air munitions, and everything. So I mean, there is a lot to learn, and the margin of error is so small. There's a lot of stuff that's it's just pass or fail, and if
Okay.
you mess up on one aspect and you fail, and you have to start the division over, and you only get so many times of being recycled before you're just out. But most of my time at EOD or at the schoolhouse was kind of just waiting around because shortly after I got there, my wife got pregnant with our first son, and
Yes.
it was EOD was something I really enjoyed, something I loved doing, um, but I didn't have the heart for it anymore. When my wife got pregnant, so I voluntarily withdrew because I thought that position because the positions are very competitive.
Right.
It would be better served with somebody who wanted to be there and had the heart for it. And so,
Well, and a lot of that is also because ever since I've known you, you've always been a family man. Like you are, your life is about your kids and your wife and making sure that the life lines up for everybody there because you want
mhm,
it to be a peaceful life because you love your family. You were a family
mhm.
man. And I can only imagine EOD being gone all the time and the the amount of risk that's involved in that job probably didn't cause a very stable household with that thought process. I can only imagine, right? Because that's no matter what you do, if you go out there, you're really risking your life playing with those things.
And it was one of those things where I wasn't so much worried about the personal safety, because I was there to do a job, but it was the pieces they're the ones that are left behind that take the toll of that. And it's just I had a lot of thoughts about that, and just I just didn't have the heart for it.
So I get the next question here is usually security forces is slotted for those that are, and nothing against it. It's a running joke within the Air Force. Lowest ASVAB score in the Air Force is what they say. That
Mm-hmm.
in services, right? And you are clearly not that, because you were able to get into any job you wanted to get into. I know I
Actually,
was.
I was qualified for, based on my ISAP score alone. There was only one job in the Air Force I was not qualified for, and I don't even remember what it was because they couldn't put down the description at MEPS because they just like some geothermal physicist or something, and that was it. Um,
Oh.
I think he needed like a 94, and that was the only one that I wasn't qualified for.
Yeah, and because my recruiter said the same thing to me. He's like, you could do any job in the Air Force you want to do. What do you want to do? I was like, I want to be a cop. He's like, no, you can do any job, like anything you want. I was like, no, I want to be a cop. He's like, okay, so you don't like weekends and you don't like days off and you like getting yelled at. Perfect. And I told him I just wanted to work around canine. I wanted to work around dogs, and that's why I chose to be a cop. So what led? Like, how did you get into the security forces field? Because you could have gone anywhere else.
It was the needs of the Air Force is how I got there.
Oh, voluntold.
Yeah, because whenever I tried to reclass, I think I put down mostly Intel stuff because I was thinking I would be like one of those guys, trying to chase Jason Bourne, like doing image analysis or doing the Intel work and stuff. And I was like, that's because I didn't really know exactly what all they did and stuff,
Right.
but that's what I had in my mind. So I think I listed mostly Intel jobs, and then of course it's always the needs of the Air Force first. So security forces it was.
So it was back to Lackland you went. And how was that experience going through security forces training?
Uh, Initially, it was pretty rough, just because most of my peers were right out of basic, so they're still in that in that mentality. And I had been out. I think I went back in July, and so I'd been out for almost half a year from basic. So I'd already gone through the steps of getting to where I had more freedoms in tech school, and so I wasn't so much treated like I was a brand new airman. And so, in all of my peers, however, all the team outside of 4 or 5 that were also reclassed, the majority of them were brand new. So it was hard to kind of, you know, because I'm in that group, I'm still getting treated like a kid.
Yes.
And at this point, I'm 22, 23 years old. I've lived outside the military on my own for a while. I wasn't, you know, I felt like I could handle more responsibilities, and I knew what I needed to do. It's just, they treat everybody like they're infants, and that was I had a lot of issues with that.
Because it was a one team, one fight, or betterment for the team, not just the individual. The mindset there that probably affected it too.
Yeah, and like I said, my wife was pregnant, so like we're separated, and she's going through all that alone, and it was a lot, because I wanted to be there but couldn't.
Yeah.
At
And,
some point, she even drove out to San Antonio and stayed at an extended stay hotel for a month just to be around, so we can see each other while I was, stuck on base.
I mean, it's a struggle, but I mean, you guys made it through that, and so you get through tech school, and tech school is about 3 months long. And now, where did you want to go after you got done with tech school? I'm guessing probably closer to home, because that's where you knew.
I put extended long on all overseas stuff. Really,
Okay.
I wanted to see Germany. I wanted to, I think I put base in Britain and then Hawaii, of course. And I mostly wanted to go overseas.
And the Air Force, in its infinite wisdom, said 200
Yeah.
miles up the road is Dyess Air Force Base, and welcome. Oh, you finish training, everything's going well. You finally get, to move your family with you. You guys get to live in your own place, and you move up to Abilene, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And how was your first experience there?
Well, that's it was kind of a running theme for me. Of course, the Air Force needs, and so they don't really. There weren't very many considerations for the individuals. So my first day, I go to sign into the squadron at Dyess, and I'm talking to the UTM because they're in charge of getting all my education records up to par and in processing and stuff. They're like, "Oh, you're Airman Utley. Okay, well you're deploying, um, and we're going to be leaving in December." I'm like, "What? Like I
Welcome.
just got here." They're like, "Yep. Well, we're sending a bunch of teams, like sending a bunch of people out, so you're it." And so, you know, and I tried to talk to him. I was like, "Look, man, like I don't have a problem going. Just can we like push it back just a little bit? Like my son's due in February. I don't want to miss that." And they're like, "No."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so my first day was, finding out I'm deploying. So I figured out like the housing situation, everything, and I go back to the house. And like at that point, I'm on 10 days of house hunt leave, and I still haven't told my wife yet. I'm like, maybe there's a chance, like something like I want to wait till I'm closer before something, I say something definitively. So after my 10 days of house hunt leave, I got 2 weeks of FTAC, and then I guess like 2 or 3 days before I graduate FTAC, the squadron's calling over there, like, "Hey, when is this guy leaving? Because he's got deployment shit he needs to do." And so my instructors let me know, like, "Well, I guess it really is going." And I remember I was at lunch one day. I went back to the house and I'm eating lunch with my wife and stuff. And I get a call from the UTM saying, "Hey, we're leaving in a couple weeks. Pack your bags. Don't even report to flights or anything. You're assigned to the UDM now, and so we're going."
That was my first time meeting you too, right? Like right
Yep.
around that time.
Yep.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's when I finally broke the news. I mean, because there was no avoiding it at that point. So that was a rough day because we'd only lived in the same roof under the same roof at that point for about a month. Before I was back out again.
Oh, that's
Uh,
rough.
and so reported to UDM and then started the whole training process. I think we had a couple of short trainings we had to go to before we officially went to our pre-deployment training in El Paso.
Yep. So moving on through that, so we go to El Paso, and then they formed the team, and we were part of you and I got selected for a part of a unique team
Mm-hmm.
because when we were there, we also witnessed some issues with leadership, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, don't want to call out anybody's name or anything like that, but there were some issues that we dealt with I don't want to say incompetent, but incompetent's a pretty good word. Team leaders that we were a part of that we thought were going to get us screwed over from the job that we really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we actually all ended up banding together, and we all got picked for the right tasking for us, the tasking that worked for us.
Yeah, I mean, and that was that outside the wire job, which was and I had talked to other people around the time, like, what does this even mean? What are we going to do? A lot of guys just they didn't even know because not all the ones with deployment experience that I was talking to, like none of them had ever done it. It was all base security and on base patrols and stuff. So it was very unique for all of us.
Yeah, and it was because the Air Force didn't really have a whole lot of outside the wire
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and we were in charge of going that 5 miles out from the base. Um, how did you enjoy that tasking? Because I know I had a lot of fun with it. We had our struggles, but I have very fond memories of the things that we went through.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I think, um, I mean, I learned a lot, about just that part of the world, learned a lot about just like myself in general, and the kind of stuff that, you know, and the stress that comes with it and working through, problems and coming up with solutions and stuff. So, I mean, it was a good opportunity to grow as a person. I mean, there's a lot of stuff with that deployment I think about often. And looking back, like I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think,
I think
uh,
our team, the squad that we had was probably uh, one of the top 3 squads in that unit.
I would
And
agree.
our team leader was, shout out to Hector, and I still talk to him, and I love the guy, but he was awesome.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to go with anyone else.
Yeah, I wouldn't have either. I think it was the best thing. And like I said, we had our struggles, right? Because we had some experiences that we didn't expect, like with Aaron and with the
Yeah.
helicopter crew and stuff like that. And um, that was rough. But when you look back at it, this crew that we had, and I still talk to a lot of the guys. I mean, it was just a fun crew and a really good group of guys that we had established together, and I miss them all.
Mm-hmm. I'm friends with most of everyone on Facebook still, so I kind of check in and kind of see what they're up to and see how they're doing. And I mean, during the time, you're thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I've only been here for a couple of days," and then, but afterwards, you realize like it was so quick. It felt like,
Yeah, yeah, it happened so fast.
and so yeah, I mean, I remember us getting there and getting off the plane, and everything is still covered in snow because it's the winter season there. And I'm like,
Yep.
so this is it. This is Afghanistan. All right, so what now when we get to work? So um, I remember those first couple of days were basic stuff. In dot, kind of learning the terrain and learning the area and stuff. But I remember those first couple of nights we went out. I was, I mean, I was stressed out. I was amped up. Because all the stuff with training. Especially like the EOD training that we went through and the pre-deployment training. They're like, hey, beware if you see a pile of trash. That's usually an indicator for IEDs and stuff. And I'm a gunner in the number 2 truck at the time. So like we're leaving the wire and there's trash everywhere. I'm like,
That's
there's a like I'm sitting there thinking like, so what piece of trash am I looking at to think it's an IED? So and I remember because we were working nights and it was cold and you get the weather forecast going in to before the for the op orders and stuff and you're looking and it's like 2 degrees. So I'm freezing my butt up there, driving through the mountains and stuff, and seeing my water freeze and my drinks are freezing, trying to stay as warm as I can. So the driver's got the heater on, but it's like cooking everybody inside because it's so hot in there, and I'm freezing. I'm bundled up with all the stuff I got. So
oh man.
it was an experience, and then it's snowing sometimes. I remember. When y'all would do dismounts and walk so many clicks in the snow up to your knees, and I was like, this is not what I expected. Whenever I'm thinking Afghanistan, I'm thinking like desert, which I've learned since was like towards the western part of the country and like Kandahar and stuff.
Yep.
But
And
man, I didn't
it's
expect to
funny.
see much snow.
And it's funny because the conversations we would have, like in the truck, because you were my gunner, you were in the truck with me, and the conversations we would have in the truck, we'd all be talking, then we'd hear your teeth chattering on the microphone as you're like, oh, whoa, this is it's cold.
Yeah, I mean, because then think about it's 6 degrees outside, and you got wind chill, and so it's in the negatives, and I'm just freezing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't make any better when because we were living in the transient tent for that first I don't know, month
Yes.
or two we were there, and so that I mean it may be 6 degrees outside, it may be 15 degrees in the tent. I
So it's a
remember
little warmer,
I
but not that
remember
much.
putting before I'd leave on missions, I'd put my laptop in my sleeping bag to try and keep it warm, so I could just crawl into it and it already warmed up, and so I mean, yeah, it was a lot, and then I think I was in country for 12 days. We had just got off a mission, and I had gotten an email from my wife earlier today, and I was able to finally check it. She's like, "Hey, I'm going on labor." oh man. So I call to kind of try and see what's going on. So I call her, and she's like she's in the hospital room, right in the middle of pushing.
Gosh.
And so I'm,
I think I remember that. I think I remember this because we had to go to leadership, like higher leadership, and try to get you like, hey, can he not go out tonight?
and because so we just got off that mission. It's like 6 a.m. our time, and it's I think around 7 or 8 p.m. local time, or in Mississippi, and she's right in the middle of pushing, and one of her friends that are in the room's holding the phone, and I'm trying to coach her, and they're trying to make sure I'm okay. I'm like, don't worry about me. She's the one doing the work. Just, I'm here. And then she gave birth to our son, and I remember that I'm thinking distinctly like because I've never been in the room. Only thing I knew about childbirth is what I'd seen on TV or read and stuff. So typically though, babies make noise
Yes.
as soon as they're born, and so like I just remember they're like, "Oh, he's here." I'm like, "Is he okay?" Like he's quiet. Like I don't hear anything. So I'm starting to panic, and they're like, "No, everything's fine." They took him, and he had a little bit of a breathing issue initially, so they put him in the NICU. But everything's fine. Everyone's healthy and stuff, and you know I got to at least be there, on the phone during that time. And I remember, we got off the phone shortly after. And I remember the next morning waking up and talking to some of the guys. And one of my buddies is like, "Man, I was so mad. You're on the phone. You're being so fucking loud. I was about to hit you until I realized what was going on." I was like, "Oh shit." And I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, but we were all happy for you when it happened. I mean, I remember in the truck we were throwing a little celebration for you,
Yeah.
and
And then I remember because like so you get those like USO care packages or there was I can't remember the organization. It was something like Soldiers Angels or some group that were sending care packages. I guess they had heard or gotten wind of what happened, and so someone sent like a handmade blanket and like a Ziploc bag of cigars.
oh, that's awesome,
I
man.
thought it
I
was really
remember that.
cool.
Oh, there's so many good memories coming from that deployment, though. I mean, the team built, like the team building
Mm-hmm.
that we had, and the way they kind of formed together, because it wasn't just like us from our base at Dias.
No,
It
we
was
have people from all
us
over.
from all over the place, and we formed a team that I mean, I still talk. Like I said, I still talk to a lot of the guys. I know you follow a lot of the guys and talk to them too, and it's so dynamic and so fun, and they're such a good group of dudes. Now, higher leadership beyond Hector, yeah, those were
Well, I
questionable.
remember we had. I mean, there was some friction for sure. I remember. I mean, a couple instances. I remember one. Like it was towards the end of our deployment. I think it was July 4th weekend that year, and it was slated to be our last mission because the next day we were doing changeover with the new teams, and so I was, I may have kind of was in the wrong a little bit, but I was like, you know what, I want to go out with a bang. And so, you get issued all like face paint and all this camo paint and stuff. And so I painted my face.
I remember this.
And
I
then
remember this.
thinking about it, I did it before I went to the chow hall. So I showed up to the chow hall, with paint all over my face. I'm sitting there eating, just not even thinking about it, And then, after chow, we go to the command center to start getting ready and loading up and stuff. And leadership sees me, and at first they're laughing. They're like, what are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I just thought it's July 4th. I figured I'd celebrate." And they're like, they chuckled, and that was it. But next thing I know, a couple of the other airmen on the team thought it was a funny and good idea, so they paraded through and they had face paint on.
Yep.
So I started this thing, and then next thing I know, we're all getting yelled at saying, "Oh, you're messing stuff up. Take that paint off. They're going to think that we're a different squad, and you know we're
I
going to be
believe
escalating." And
I believe the term that was coined throughout the deployment for our team was cowboys. We were cowboys.
which didn't make any sense to me because we just did our job. We did what we were supposed to do. Because our particular mission, because there were 5 different squads, each had their own tasking. Of course, one squad was mostly dealing with like the coin aspect. Trying to pacify and make good relationships with the locals and try and get intel and stuff. And our mission was to go after the dudes that are launching rockets at the base. And so, like, and oftentimes in the pursuit of those missions, we might, accidentally bump a wall or something, or stomp through a vineyard chasing somebody. And, the other team would have to come in and kind of like, hey, we're sorry about these guys. They were doing something. And
Been known to happen a couple times. I mean, we can't
yeah,
confirm or
but I mean,
deny.
you can't, it's unavoidable at times, because I mean, if you're on foot walking through, some village or some vineyard and stuff, one, it's so dark, you get lost easy, and then two, like, you don't have a good lay of the land in a lot of these areas, and so it's unavoidable.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we get back from our deployment, and you're back at we're back at Dias. We're back on a normal working schedule. You can finally get into a normal working schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And how's the family life at that point? Like how's everything? Because now you're finally sleeping in under the same roof as your wife.
Yeah, well, I mean, initially, because you'll hear the story of, time and time again from guys coming back. That first period of time after you get back is just readjustment, and you're trying to figure out how to live under the same roof again. And for me, the life was completely different than it was whenever I left. When I left, my wife was pregnant, and our apartment wasn't hardly even unpacked yet. And then I'm gone. I come back, the apartment is completely set up. My wife is not pregnant anymore, and now I've got like a 6 month old. Trying to figure out, all the aspects of fitting in with that, because she had to figure out how to do everything on her own, right?
Right.
So
Right.
now I'm like, I'm the wrench in the cog, and I got to figure out where my place is, and like how to be helpful and be there for her because she's already figured all this out, and then they're still adjusting to, being at the base, because I didn't get that opportunity to do that before I left. I mean, I had never even worked flight
Yeah,
before
and that's
I
kind of where the question is, because now you're adjusting to a new job, essentially, right?
Mhm.
And you're adjusting to being a dad at home and a husband now too.
Yeah, so I mean, I never worked flight. I hadn't done any of my CDCs. Like, I was, as the way it was put to me, way behind the curve. I'm like, I just was gone 8 months. How am I behind the curve? How is it my fault? Because I remember, I think my first day walking through the squadron, the flight chief I was assigned to, he saw like a different face, and he's like, "Wait a minute, you're Utley." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "You know how much shit you've caused me?" I'm like, "No, this is my first day back, dude. Like, what are you talking about?" He's like, "You got to get your CDCs. You were like 0% trained, and you've been here, well, I mean, almost a year now." Like,
Well, I wasn't
okay,
here.
he's like, "Get a haircut too." Like,
Oh man. So how much longer did you have on your enlistment? Because you'd almost been in 2 years at that point.
that would have been. I think I would have had like 4.5, four and some change.
Okay. And did you finish your entire time at Dias?
Yeah, I didn't go anywhere.
And then because I picked up a deployment literally 6 months after we got back. I got on another tasking.
I remember
And
that.
and then I had PCS shortly thereafter. Did you end up deploying anymore after that?
No, I got tasked, and I've got my qualms with the first deployment, but I think the second one's the one that's kind of that haunts me the most. It was 2013. I was tasked on a fast mission back to Afghanistan, back to Bagram, and I was on a good group, mostly younger airmen. And there was 18 of us, and of the 18, only three of us had deployed, um, and I was the only one that had gone to a combat location, specifically Bagram. So I kind of feel like I had the lay of the land. I was senior airman at the time, but I did have a line for staff, and so there's a bunch of young airmen. So I felt like it was, and I don't know if I made the choice to do it or if it just kind of happened, but I felt like I kind of like took like a leadership role to make sure these guys came back safe. I felt like it was my responsibility, and so it was. Thanksgiving that year, we were supposed to send out to Eglin again for training the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Right.
So all the bags are prepped. All the bags are prepped. All of our shit's loaded. We've got all the checklists done. All the paperwork's done. We're just waiting on time. And then Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, I got a call saying my dad had unexpectedly passed.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
Um, so, you know, at at that time, I was like, well, fuck, I got this appointment in a couple of days. Like, I got this stuff I got to take care of at home. What? I'm not really quite sure what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out. And my wife called really good friends of ours. We still talk to the Donovans, Sean and Krista.
Yep. Yep.
And Sean, he picked me up because my wife, she knew I was upset. She didn't really want me driving. And we lived on base, so it was only like a minute or two to the squadron. So I can talk to leadership there. So he picked me up and we drove over there. And first person I talked to was Sergeant Clark, a really good dude. And I told him, I was like, hey, Dad died. Just give me a couple of days to handle the funeral and stuff. I'll drive and I'll be there Monday in Eglin, so I can be with the team. I'll be there. He's like, oh man, all right, just don't worry about it. And I think he's trying to placate me, because he knew I was worried about it. As soon as I turn around and leave, go talk to the shirt and leadership, Sean came up behind me and talked to Sergeant Clark. He's like, hey, I'm ready to go. I'll take a spot. Because I've already got all my stuff. I've got, because he was on a
That's
team.
awesome. But that's awesome because you don't see that a lot.
No, he was on a deployment team as well that was supposed to leave, I think, a month or two after us. That ended up getting canceled. So in the one piece of, because you needed ECAC training or evade and escape training for the fast mission. He was one of the one guys in the squadron who'd already gone it because he was on that Bagram team with us. And so he, checked all the boxes and he'd be like, hey, I'm good. I got all my stuff. I'll go. And so he took my spot, which I'm thankful for because, while it hurt me leaving the team, because I built a good relationship with them and I felt like I was responsible for them, I couldn't have picked a better dude to do it.
I hands down. And I remember Donovan very well. And I'm so happy that he actually stepped up and took that for you.
Yeah. And I knew like the sacrifice that it would take. And then, especially short notice, he had, 3 kids at home and, a family to think about. And I think about it all the time. It was a lot for him to do. And then I've always been really thankful for him and his family.
So now you finish your enlistment at Dias and you've decided 6 years and I'm punching my ticket, right? So how was the transition out? Because the transition for everybody is different. Some people really, they're happy they're out. Everything's great. Some people, they're like, what do I do now?
I mean, it was rough, and that's probably saying it mildly. Because when we left, my wife had been working for, the state of Texas for some years, so she, was, in a really good position, career wise, and a lot of people in the area knew her. And at that time, I was investigations and had been for a couple of years. So I'd knew most of the law enforcement and city leadership as well as base leadership, because I'd, met the police chief and, had a good relationship with the base commander and everything. So we're, established in our career fields. We are known in the area and I left it all behind. Our oldest son was 4 at the time and my wife was 7 months pregnant and, decided to, hey, the goal was to go back and get my degree and her goal was to get her PhD. And so we took that opportunity. I mean, it wasn't easy. I wouldn't suggest it to anybody or recommend it to anybody, but I mean, it can be done. It's hard though. I mean, we ended up moving 3 times in 6 months. Yeah. And losing that sense of purpose and that sense of importance and going back to school where, back to square one, I'm hanging out with, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who are in school for the first time. And, so I utilize some of the VA services on campus and I was just, I mean, it was a lot. I mean, I think the biggest challenge was just to, I don't know, not throat punch people, because because I mean, and I understand, I had already lived a life.
Right.
I've already been through a lot and experienced a lot. A lot of these kids, the biggest challenge that they dealt with in the day was whether their base or their bus was late getting them to class. I'm like, just walk. I mean, it's not a terribly big campus. Just walk. It's not that big a deal. Why are you getting worked up about this? And then so it took some time for me to recognize that myself. Like they're young adults. They've not lived life yet. I have.
Right. Where
I've been.
you've lived a lifetime of lives in 6 years, right? And
Mhm.
I still struggle with a lot of it too, which is another reason why I wanted to do this, because I still struggle with not having the camaraderie and not having the brotherhood and not having that family, the family outside of family. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
I still go through it, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head on that too. Like, I'm no longer like important, but you are. You're important to your family, but it's just that sense of purpose. We don't have a sense of purpose.
Yeah, and during during my time in the military, like I had struggled at various times with that. What is my purpose? And so there have been times where that kind of evolved. When I was deployed, you know, while I wasn't totally on board with why we were there in the first place, my purpose was to make sure the 40,000 people on this base make it home.
Yep.
That was my purpose, is make because for the majority of those, none of those people wanted to be there. So make sure they make it home. Make sure my team makes it home. Make sure that um, everybody left the way they came. So it was, it's one of those things that kind of revolves, various times in life. Just kind of figure out what your purpose is.
Well, you did a good job, man, because you still got all of us here. I mean, it's unfortunate sometimes things do happen, and we know what we get into when we sign up for it.
Uh, we
But
don't. We don't. I mean, we have like a blanket idea, but you don't know
right,
because the Air Force or the military in general is going to use you however it needs to. So, I mean, the only known is that the Air Force is going to use me, but you have no idea what that entails.
yep,
It's just,
exactly.
every day could be a little different, or you never know the situation you're going to be in. And, my experience, being security forces, I always felt that our training more aligned with what we did with the Army guys.
Well, for everybody that's been watching, you see two different clothes than you saw earlier in the episode, and the reason for that is because I had some technical difficulties, and this part was recorded a couple weeks later. So, Jay, thanks for coming back and finishing up this interview, man. Tons of good stuff on the first part. So the second part is going to be pretty fun too.
Yeah, oh yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome, man. So where we left off, we were talking about transitioning. And one of the things that you had mentioned is like these 18, 19-year-old kids don't know what they're stepping into. And by the time you had come in, you had lived a lifetime. So how was the transition process for you getting out of the military when you decided to go ahead and separate?
Um, I mean, it was challenging for sure. It was at that time, I was getting out. My wife was 7 months pregnant, and I enrolled back in school and stuff. So trying to pick up where I left off, when I left school. So, uh, it was just it was a pretty rapid, uh, transition for the most part, trying to figure out the steps forward that we needed to take. I stepped back in school, and using the GI Bill, it's not, they wouldn't pay for classes that I've already taken and gotten credit for. So, here I am stepping in, back in like Cal 3, which I've not seen calculus in the 6 or 7 years since I'd last seen it. So it was a big struggle, especially academically. And then, we had our, so oldest was 4 at the time, and then like I said, my wife was 7 months pregnant. So it was a tough, and I decided to go into the active reserves, and
Okay.
finish out my 2 year obligation there. And that, I think that helped a lot, because doing my duty time, I still was able to uh, it, get back into that lifestyle, being in the military and, all the structure and then discipline that went with it. Um, so it was kind of like it wasn't like a hard stop for me. I had like, a little bit more time to transition. Um, I think one of the hardest things having to deal with though was, you know, we had spent so much time in Abilene, and I had ranked up, when I'd left active duty, I was a staff and I was working investigations. My wife was working for the state of Texas. And, so in that area, we had, kind of built a community and kind of I used to joke saying we were a power couple, because
Yeah.
I had, met the chief of police. I was on good terms with the wing commander and, met the mayor and, a lot of the influential people in the community. Um, you know, partly, circumstance and others, with my dealings with the military and investigation specifically. So leaving that, giving it all up, you're trying to find your place in the world after that.
And that makes it makes a lot of sense. You say that too, because you almost feel like you are a power couple. You've established kind of your roots a little
Mhm.
bit, at least, in that one little area that you never thought you'd stick around in. But you start establishing it, and then you start kind of second guessing.
Yeah, so there was a lot of second guesses, especially after my first test in calculus when I came back. I failed it like tremendously, and I was like, "This was a terrible mistake. I shouldn't have done this. Like, it's not too late. I'll go back." But it's just with everything, it just took some time. I set a rule for myself. I would, whether I had homework or not, I'd spend an hour working through all my schoolwork just to kind of get back in the groove of things and kind of pick up where I left off and remember this a lot of the stuff that I forgot. So um, in the end, it all worked out. I mean, I wouldn't, I won't say it was easy. Um, and if everyone's trying to make a decision similar to that one, think real hard about it because it was tough. That first year and a half of getting out was really tough.
And
Just
you brought something up though that I kind of want to stay on for a second. You said you didn't come to a hard stop. Like for me, it was a hard stop because I got medically retired.
mhm,
And for a lot of people, when they retire, it's a hard stop because they don't have the option to do the active guard or active reserve. You know what I'm saying?
mhm.
Um, you said that helped you out a bit. In what way?
Well, it was because there is that sense of camaraderie with military members, and especially with security forces. Um, you've all been through crappy situations. Whether it's training or whether it's leadership or other individuals in the units. You've all dealt with similar situations, or at least you can relate to them. And so there is that sense of brotherhood and camaraderie that's there, and you know 3 weeks out of the month I'd get to uh you know live my civilian life and trying to pick up the pieces and figure out where we're going, and then but there was always that weekend where I'd go on duty and then I'm surrounded by my peers, with the structure and the discipline that's there, and the mentality, the mindset, because the unit that I joined, at Keesler, which was a great unit, their whole mission was to train and deploy. That's all they did. So
That's
they
cool.
had to be ready to go at any given time. So those weekends that we're on duty, it's always deployment prep. It's always making sure everyone's up to date on all their medical or dental or training records. So there's this it's the same sort of tasks that you would find yourself in active duty. Um, and so I got to work with a lot of experienced people, and it really helped in the sense that I just didn't walk away completely. I still had that ties, or still had those ties, because you know what being security forces. I mean, 90% of the work is boring. I mean, if you're doing security or law enforcement patrol, especially on a small base where things don't really happen too much, it can get really redundant really fast. But the rest of that, the 10%, whether you're training, doing like your SABC or deployment ops or being deployed for, you get to experience a lot of very cool things. Some, can take a toll on you for sure, but it's, they're, learning opportunities to say the least.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you, because when I got out and when I separated, I still to this day have a hard time trying to find where I blend in and where I fit in, because I'm no matter what in any civilian job you go to, doesn't matter what the job is, it's you're still trying to search for that sense of purpose and that mission and then that camaraderie. Because it used to be, if when we were in Abilene together, if you wanted to come by my house, I mean, come by my house and let's have a beer and let's sit around and talk because I know what you went through and I know what you're going through and you know what I'm going through.
Mhm.
Right. No matter what. And we have that shared camaraderie. When you get out into the civilian world, it's like, hey, what's everybody doing this weekend? And they're like, oh, no, not hanging out with people from work.
Yeah. And it's, it's kind of like I guess like the shared suck experience.
Yes.
You're all in this situation together. Even people that weren't in your unit, if you're living on base housing, you walk out, you know, there, might be a guy from ammo or some other guy from, transportation or something like that. And y'all, all have a baseline of shared experiences, cause you all went through
Yes.
basic, you all went through various tech schools, but, they might be different in a way, but, the roots are still the same.
And then they
And
probably also
everybody can
deployed.
relate to having, certain style of leadership or certain NCOs or troublemakers in the unit. Everyone can relate to that. And so, when you got out or when you get out, I mean, I've been out uh, 8 years now, and I still don't feel like I'm truly comfortable in my position,
Yep.
because it's just different. I mean, I don't know my neighbors across the street,
Yeah.
but
Same here.
um, being in base housing or being on, in the military, it's just, I don't know. It's just I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. It's just you feel like to some extent, like some sense of comfort with that person, even though they're strange. You might not even talk to them. Maybe it's just you wearing the same uniform, um, but it's a little different. And then you know I think, some of the issues or some things for me too was after I got out is when I really got to sit down and kind of process a lot of the stuff that went down and what we did. Um, just in my time. One that I think about all the time. I got a lot of recognition for it, and I I just thought I was doing my job right. And there are other people involved, and I saw that they didn't get the same sort of recognition, and that always bothered me. And I tried to bring it up, when I could, but it's just there was there was an incident. We were, remember those tornado drills we used to do on base,
Yes.
where there are exercises, but they would simulate injuries or tornado touchdown, and so people would be staged all over the base, and
Mass casualty exercises.
yeah, I remember it was one of those. I think um, it was after I got my line for staff. It was right before I went into ALS. Um, I think security. I was one of the security. I was security leader. Um, and so we got called for the exercise to go provide aid to somebody who got injured and stuff. And so I mean, this is a day long exercise, right?
Right. Right.
So we're out there and we're providing simulated SABC and everything, and it's hot. It's the middle of the summer in West Texas, so it's brutal outside. So
The humidity's nuts there too.
and so by the end of the day, we're all kind of wore out. The exercise is winding down. They called index. We're like, all right. So we go back to our posts on the flight line and we're, checking on the other security units out there. And it's me and White as security one. And over the net, we hear there's a medical emergency somewhere on base. Somebody like fell off a roof or something like that. And we knew the police unit, and it was out of our area of responsibility. Police units were responding. We're like, all right, cool. And so we're just hanging out, and then we notice uh, a vehicle approaching us rapidly. Headlights are flashing, they're honking the horn. There's people waving their arms out the truck. We're like, what is going on with this? We thought maybe it was the exercise, or maybe something to do with that medical emergency. And a vehicle gets close, and this guy yells out the driver's side. He's like, "Hey, man, my buddy just fell. Yeah, he doesn't look good. I don't think he's breathing." And so we respond, me and White, and we're pulling up, and I can see this guy laying in the middle of the flight line next to one of the hangars, and I can see as we're pulling up, his face is blue. He's not responsive. He's out. And so I get out of the car, and I tell White to go get the kit because we always had that medical emergency kit in the back of the trunk or whatever. And so I'm approaching, and I remember it's just my brain went blank. Like, what am I doing? What do I do with this situation? And then without like a conscious thought, my body just kind of kicked into gear and started performing CPR. Because they always harp about training and SABC specifically and stuff, and why like high stress situations, like your brain doesn't work like it's supposed to, but we train so that our body does. And I saw that firsthand. I stood there for a second and then immediately started jumping into CPR.
What is it they say that you resort to the highest level of training you have? Your body always resorts to it.
I immediately start chest compressions, and then as I'm doing that, my brain kind of catches up. Like, okay, remember, like head tilt, like the
head
chin tilt lift. Make sure I lean his head back to open up the airways. And then I remember my first rescue breath. I realized that I forgot to plug his nose. I'm like, oh man, forgot a step. So then I plug his nose, and I keep going at and I'm giving CPR for several minutes, and then at one point White comes up, and all those kits that we had, they're all sealed with numbered tabs, like metal tabs. Like this man ripped it open with his bare hands. Like he cut up his hands pretty good, ripping that metal tab, and he hands me the I guess the mouth guard for the resuscitation. I'm like, I've never seen that. I don't even know what's in that kit because they don't ever show you what was in it.
Right, because it's sealed.
They just tell you it's there for medical emergencies, but you have no idea what's in it. So I'm like, I've never been trained on this thing, so I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know how to use it, so I just keep at it. And then he gets on the comm, and he's providing assistance and helping me and letting BDoc know what's going on. And then another police unit comes up, and Anglesey and Washington get out. And Washington's on the net, relaying with medical personnel and BDoc where we are, keeping them updated. Anglesey jumps in, and she starts providing chest compressions while I continue to breathe. And, again, that goes on for a couple minutes before, EMS finally shows up, and we get out of the way so that they could do their thing, and so once they loaded up, that was it. They drove off, and that was the end of the situation. And we're all kind of left there, whole, thumbs up, like, what? Okay, well, what now? Right. So then, it just so happens to be a shift change. So we're, going to the armory to do guard mount and change shifts, and then I leave. I'm still kind of in a daze. I'm like, I guess that's it. Like, all right. And then I so happen to meet my wife at the CDC to pick up our son, and she sees me. She sees my face. I'm just my brain's not there. I'm still on the flight line doing CPR. So I tell her what's going on, and then I get a phone call from the BDoc saying I need to go to the squadron to provide a statement. And so I'm writing it for the just the BDoc entry, the incident report and stuff. Nothing out of the norm. So I'm there, and I'm writing my statement, and then I get done with it. And as I'm leaving the room, I see some of our leadership, Master Sergeant we had, and the head of the DAF guards. And I'm like, well, these guys are, they're pretty much up the chain, so they'll probably have more information for me. So I asked him, like, so what happened to him? Like, is he all right? Is he gonna make it? Like, I don't even know his name. I don't know any of the circumstances other than that. No, Master Sergeant looked at me. He said, "Oh, he's gone. He's toast. Like they couldn't get him." I'm like, "Damn!" He's just all nonchalant about it. And I was like, "Damn, that sucks." And the leader of the DAF guards, he kind of hits him in the shoulder. He's like, "Hey, man, these are the ones that perform CPR. You know, they're the ones who responded. You know, and I could see the realization on Master Sergeant's face. It's like he's like, "Oh man, I shouldn't have.
I'd have
I
messed up.
messed up. Like I shouldn't have been so nonchalant." But you know, it kind of messed me up. You know, because I was just thinking about it. You know, what if I had gotten there a little sooner? What if I didn't do what I was supposed to do right? What if I wasn't doing chest compressions long enough or hard enough? Or you think about all of these different things. And so that evening, to kind of try and get my mind out off of it, my wife, she took me to a restaurant down there in town, and we're sitting there eating. It's pretty quiet, because I'm still processing. I get a phone call from one of my NCOs, Sergeant Kogi, which, I mean, if you've ever met him, is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He'd do anything for you. But he called me that night while I'm at dinner, and he's like, because he told me that he was at the shop at on base, and he just ran into our captain, and he was asking about it, and she told him that they were able to resuscitate him, and that he was in ICU. He was in critical care. He was stable, but he wasn't quite out of the woods yet. And so Sergeant Kohi, hearing that, he called me immediately because he knew I'd worked on him, and he wanted to let me know. He's like, "Hey man, just letting you know, let's talk to Captain at the gas station." And she said that like he was, like they brought him back, like he was,
That's awesome.
he was, stable, but he, still needed to watch, but he was stable. And I remember just like all this wave of emotion just kind of just washed through me as it happened. And it seemed like after that, I had like public affairs was talking to me. I got invited to meet with the wing commander. They invited me to some like lunch off base. They had pictures of me in the Dias Times. You know, and I was like, man, this is awesome. But I quickly realized it was just me and Anglesey there. It wasn't White wasn't there, Washington wasn't there. They didn't get the same recognition, and that just every time I could, I brought it up. I was like, I wasn't just me. I didn't do anything special. I was just doing my job. I had other people there with me.
Because it's a team effort. When you're doing something like that, it's a team effort. It's not just one individual.
Yeah, and the guy, he ended up surviving. He was he married and stepkid, and they were really appreciative. I never met any of them. I would still ask from time to time about them, but it bugged me that it was just only half of us are getting the recognition, and that always bothered me.
Well, how are you dealing with coping with it nowadays today?
Well, I mean, the big thing is I looked at training very differently after that. Uh, training was always important, and I would always pay attention. But there's always that group of people that will kind of like joke around or won't take it seriously. Before I would just kind of let it slide and like it's whatever. But after that, I'd call that shit out. I was like, you never know when this shit's gonna save somebody.
That's true too, man. You never really know when you really need it. That's when you're gonna wish you pay attention.
Yeah, and so I mean, I guess the biggest impact was how I approach training things. You practice how you. I mean, what does the saying go? You practice how you fight, or you practice how you play, and play how you fight.
Yep.
And so if you're not practicing with 100% effort, how in the world are you going to expect to excel when the real deal happens?
Yep, I totally agree. So now that brings me into the next question, man. So what's Jason Utley doing now today?
Well, now, I graduated with my electrical engineering degree in 2020. And so the last few years just kind of been, doing that. I just got picked up at a new position close to where I live, doing some really cool stuff. I'm really excited to do. So, it's been a long road, but I feel like I've finally got to the point where I wanted to get. My wife, the plan was always, go back and get my bachelor's degree, and she wanted to go get her PhD. So as of this last Thursday, she's officially, doctor now. So,
Man, awesome.
uh,
Congratulations to her.
15-year plan, and it finally kind of worked out, and now it's trying to figure out what to do next.
What to do when you grow up, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are we going to do when we grow up?
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of the thing now, is just, still continue to grow and develop as a person, and live the life like that I wanted to live, and impact the people that I wanted to impact. I always wanted things to be better for my kids than they were for me. And, I wanted to make it to where they didn't have to work so hard to make the decisions that I had to make. So,
Man, I can tell you right now, from knowing you as a young airman that came in, and then watching you grow and seeing where you're at now, man, that's so awesome. And I'm so proud of you, man. And I'm honored to have served with you personally. You and I had gone through a deployment together, and you were my gunner for my team. And to see what you've grown into, man, I'm extremely proud of you, dude.
no, I appreciate it. There's been a lot of experiences, and that, the people that you serve with, and the people that you deploy with and stuff, those are the people you don't want to ever forget.
Yeah. And
I still
even
think about all the time.
even the hard times and the bad times, they still stick with you, and you still remember it. And
And I remember one of the senior NCOs that was on the team that we were relieving. Anytime that we go through, like, a hard dismount, or a not pleasant situation, he'd always shrug his shoulders like, "Yeah, it'll be fun." And I approach that. I approach everything with that now.
me too.
I'd
It's funny.
never look at a
It's
situation for the bad stuff. I was like, look at everything as a learning opportunity. In a way, I'm going to learn something. It might not be a good thing, but I'm going to learn something from this. And you try and find the positives.
it's funny because I think of it the same way, because that's what Pies used to say to us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, they'd tell us, they give us the mission. They were like, hey, it's gonna be sketchy, and he's like, could be fun. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we always handled it. We always took it with could be fun.
Yeah, that's it. You don't really know what you're going to get into until you're there, and so why, set yourself up for, I won't say failure, but set yourself up for a bad experience if you're looking at it in a negative way before you even start.
Dude, 1,000,000%, man, 1,000,000%.
So everything. So after that, I'm always the first to volunteer for something that I don't really want to do, to get it out of the way. Because I know me, I'll just sit there and dwell on it. Like when I got OC'd the first time, we had that big class. I was like, I'll go first. I don't want to see anyone else do it. I'm just going to do it and get it over with. Set the example.
Let's just get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna suck if you go first or last, anyways. No matter how many times you go, no matter what order you go in, it's
To
gonna
me,
suck.
I learned it's so much worse if you go last.
Yeah.
Because then you get to see everybody else go through it and see how they experience it and how awful it is, and it starts to play with you. It starts to kind of worm its way in your brain. Just, you know what, just go first.
Yep.
Don't think about it. Don't even, don't stress about it. You don't dread it. You just get it over with.
So, last question for you, and then we'll close it out, man. Do you have any advice if somebody's thinking about getting out or separating, or if they're coming up on retirement, or they're coming up on their separation date, and even for those who may be joining in or joining the military or the first responder corps as a police officer or paramedic or a firefighter? Any words of advice that you would give them?
The thing for me, what helped me a lot after I got out, and what helped me during, especially deployment, all the hard times, is you find your purpose. It's specific to you. Whether you believe in what's being done or not, find a way to find your purpose. Like in Afghanistan, I didn't particularly wasn't in favor of the reason why we were there, but I also knew that there were 40,000 people on that base who would rather be somewhere else. My team of guys, they, had loved ones at home. They had kids at home. Some of them just gave birth. I mean, one of our guys, his wife gave birth the day we left, the day we got on the plane. And, I know he'd much rather be there with his brand new kid. I mean, he's in the same boat. Didn't meet his kid until we had already gotten home, 6 months, 7 months later. So it's to find your purpose. I looked at it like, these people don't want to be here, and my job is to make sure they get home. And that's what helped me through that. I mean, when it came to, schooling or when I got out and stuff, it's like, you left for a reason. You didn't want to leave anymore. You wanted to be there for your kids. That's your purpose. Be home for them. Or you wanted to, you know, work at this tough job because there weren't really any other opportunities. Your your purpose is to make sure your kids are fed, make sure your kids have a home, make sure that they're comfortable and they have opportunities that I didn't have. So that was my purpose. So I kind of approach everything like that. Just, what is my purpose in this moment? What am I working to?
That's awesome, man.
And that helped me a lot. And especially when I got out, and I would say for anyone who's getting out, you don't have to have a concrete plan, but you should have a plan. Because you hear it all the time. These guys get out and they don't know what to do with their lives anymore. And it always leads to bad things, or always leads to trouble sometimes. You don't have to have a concrete plan, but have something in mind that you're going to do, because you got to stay busy. Because if you don't, your brain's just going to, and I'm not saying avoid the processing or avoid the stuff, the memories and the experience, because that won't help anything. I mean, I run toward, like, mentally, I run towards the hard thoughts, and
Awesome.
that helps me get through it. Because um, it's too easy to become reclusive in a way, or withdraw into yourself, right? So
And we see it a lot, right? Like, a lot of people don't want to talk about it, so they kind of shy away from it, and it doesn't help them. It just hurts them in the long run. So
I mean,
I can,
it builds up, and you'll end up pushing everybody you love away.
yeah, absolutely. And I admire what you're saying. You run towards the hard thoughts and you embrace it, and then you cope with it, and then you deal with it, and it helps you. And I admire that. And I think I'm taking that as a piece of advice that you're teaching me as well, because I used to be the opposite way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I
and
used to be the guy.
I used to do the same. It's too easy to avoid it. This thing, it hurts. It doesn't feel good. I don't like it. I'm not even gonna fucking deal with this right now.
Yep.
And there's probably a time and a place for, sometimes. I mean, if you're in the middle of a situation and you don't have the luxury of sitting down and thinking about it, but when things quiet down, you need to live with it. Sit in it, just embrace it, because that's an experience that you've had. It's never going to go away. And the longer you put it off, the more it's going to ruin you.
Man, well said. That's fantastic advice, man. But hey, yeah. So we're gonna close. I'm gonna close this out real quick. So for those of you that are listening, if you want to keep following, keep tabs on us and following us on Instagram and X, we're at Outranked Pod. On Facebook, we're the Outranked Podcast, and we're also on TikTok, Outranked Podcast 1. Go ahead and find us there. You can always like, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know how we're doing, let us know what you want to see, and we're also on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So, Jay, thank you so much, man, for rejoining me and joining me the first time. Your story is awesome, and I'm very proud of you. Like I told you earlier, and I mean that. And it's I always find this stuff nice to catch up with old friends
Yeah,
and
man. And I appreciate you were having me on and having the opportunity to catch up and talk, and it's been fun.
yeah, absolutely, brother. And we'll get you back on again soon too.
Yeah, man.
So, and for everybody listening, we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.
All right, man. Talk to you later.